Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week. It is the forum for all the stories you didn't know you wished you knew about the world of sports and sports marketing, with a specific focus on collecting this week, and you'll find out why in just a moment. I'm joined across the studio in lovely Toronto, Ontario, Canada, at Frameworth headquarters. Can we call it headquarters? I asked to Brian
You can call
Aaronworth,
it whatever you want.
president of Frameworth Sports Marketing. What do you call it? Home? Because
my second home.
Your second home.
Probably spend more time here.
I was going to say, apart from when you're asleep, yeah, you definitely spend more time here. And in some cases, you pull a George Costanza and sleep under your desk, I think.
Yeah.
It's been good. No, but I'm happy to have you back. You're just back from some time at the cottage, obviously, trying to get your time off. That's how you work.
No, I was dealing with all sorts of crap on Facebook all the time I was up there. So
here is a little bit of insight behind the scenes in the realm of memorabilia as pertains to Frameworth Sports Marketing. I don't know that there are a ton of other memorabilia companies out there, large or small, that the president spends as much time filtering through, responding to, fielding questions from people on social media. We all know social media can be a bit of a headache sometimes. There were a couple hiccups with some of the processes we had over the long weekend. You spent most of your time up at the cottage responding to Facebook messages and putting some things in place to try to address some of the issues that had come up. Why do you do that to yourself?
I don't know. Here's the thing. I like to get on board and I like to understand what our clients need. I try and follow Facebook pages. That's the upside. It really gives me some insight as to how to move forward, what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right. The problem with it, of course, is Facebook trolls that just are brutal. And I take everything pretty personally. And I have a hard time shutting it down. So when I get a vicious comment that I feel is undeserved,
personal attacks,
which is what happens out there in every group. Some groups monitor it better than others. Then I do, and then I can't. I don't respond anymore, and then I don't sleep nights because I'm pissed off and whatever. But anyways,
because you're not under your bed, under the table in the
that's exactly
in the office.
It. That's social media. That's what you have to deal with. But
in and among, there are some very positive remarks and some good constructive feedback that you can get, but you do have to weed through some of the more vicious vitriol that you'll find on there as well. Now, I think one of the things that has changed your perspective on dealing one-on-one with the consumer and the end user and the collector was COVID. We had to turn more to an e-commerce platform, and our guest today is no stranger to that, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit. This week, we're joined by a man who, along with his dedicated team of organizers, has been running the Sport Card Expo, Canada's largest sports collectible show, for over 5 years now, with over 200 dealers and 100,000 square feet of collectibles, trades, autograph signings, and more. It's the true North Pole of the memorabilia world. Sound interesting? Well, you're in luck. If you're in the Toronto area, you can stop by the International Centre between June 2nd and June 5th this week, 2022. Tickets and info can be found at sportcardexpotoronto.com. And I should say that the June 2nd date is for VIPs only. How do you become a VIP? Well, there's only one way to find out. You got to go to sportcardexpotoronto.com and get all the information there, as well as tickets. We're joined by Steve Menzie. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for being here and for the great introduction.
You know what? I wrote the introduction. I was reading it and almost forgot to say your name at the end of it. It's not really the way you're supposed to do it. Yeah. I was like Narcissus, just like stuck admiring my own introduction and forgot everything else. That's the story of Narcissus, right? Yeah. I was staring in a lake.
Something about the internet, yeah.
Nope, definitely not. I don't think the internet existed back then. But listen, I want to start, Steve, obviously, as the organizer for this event. Let's just start bare bones. Give us an introduction to what you can expect this weekend, or what your organization stands for and what it is you're trying to bring to the community.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, the show is all things in the hobby, collectibles, cards, memorabilia, autographs, the whole experience. And it's, to your point, it's the biggest show in Canada by a long shot. In fact, it's the second biggest show in North America, second only to the national. That rotates each year, but and there's this once a year. We do this show twice a year.
Right.
Once at this, generally we're in this early May and in November around the Hall of Fame weekend. This year a little bit later in June, but yeah, it is. To your point, it's over 200 dealers, and this year it's even more. And we'll get to that, but and it's everything. Many guys that have done this show since its inception in 1991.
Yeah.
And the biggest surprise for me, frankly, is how much a part of their lives this is. Our collectors, our dealers, and everything else. And that's something I only really started to appreciate through the pandemic, was how important this is to them as part of their community.
I can't wait to talk about the way the pandemic affected not just your business model, but your relationships, the structure of your life. As you mentioned, yes, the collectors have this as a touchstone twice a year. They come from all over North America. It's not just Toronto. But they come and this is their chance to exhibit their wares and to build their community and to get in touch with old friends. And COVID did a lot to a lot of people, but not being able to physically do something that requires, or people would have thought it required, being physically at a certain location, just really sent everyone for a loop. And you made some changes there, and we will get into talking about how COVID shaped your business model and how you adapted. But before then, I want to get to know, for the listener, a little bit more about you. People who know the Expo, they know your name, but they may not know who you are. Let's start with this. What is your history with collecting and memorabilia?
That'll be a short answer.
Okay, there you go.
I've actually never been a collector. I came to be to running this show via a long and circuitous path.
Sure.
But prior to taking over the Sport Card Expo, I was running Fan Expo Canada, so on the Comic-Con space.
Right.
And that market has been blowing up, kind of preceded the growth in the hobby collectible. But so I was running Fan Expo, and one year when we had to expand that event, we took over both buildings of the downtown convention center, and we felt that we needed an additional element to that show. So we added sports. And Aman Gupta, who was the founder of Fan Expo, got his start in the space, in the sports world. So that's how I got introduced to the sport card expo. We did some sports at Fan Expo.
Interesting.
And long story less long, once Fan Expo was sold, I moved on. The previous owner and the founder of Sport Card Expo, Al Sinclair, decided he wanted to sell. And I thought, yeah, this is good. I understand events. But it was the same process for me. Before I started with Fan Expo, I don't think I'd ever read a comic book as a kid.
Right.
I was the kid that was out
more
playing.
of a business venture as opposed to needing to know the inside part of it.
Right.
Yeah, I've never come from and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but I've never come from the fan collector or fanboy perspective.
Sure.
In many ways, I think that's helped me because I'm pretty objective and I don't get caught up in the minutiae, but the other elements. Yeah. So that's served me well. And frankly, if I can be perfectly candid, I was probably a little judgmental of the whole collector approach. Initially, more so on the Comic-Con side.
Yes.
I didn't get it.
Yeah.
But what I've and this is probably again a lot of answers into one question, but I've really come to appreciate the commonality and then the passion that collectors have.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I had a dedicated question around that. I hadn't realized the direct involvement or the almost like the inception of the idea of the Sport Card Expo came at Fan Expo. I didn't realize that, but I have always been fascinated walking the floor. I've been involved through Frameworth in the Expo for quite a long time. Also, I am a fan of that nerd culture as well. Fan Expo is where I would be drawn, to be honest, more than Sport Card Expo. But walking even the Sport Card Expo in Toronto, you will find booths that are not just cards and memorabilia and game used items and this and that rarities, but you do have some of those comics. You do have vinyl collectibles, vinyl music as well. Last time I was there, I was buying records from people. What do you think it is that kind of serves as the connector between a fanatic of sports and a fanatic of comics? Why is there that commonality there? Why can they coexist in the same space?
Well, that's in fact what I look for, as opposed to the differences. And again, back to that year, 2013, and for Fan Expo, when we had sports, there were a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, those two can never clash."
Right.
It's the nerds,
it's jocks and nerds, right? That's what I thought.
There's going to be slushies thrown on. So there's pop culture references all over for this, but so it was more finding that commonality. To your point, is what do they have in common?
Sure.
And that is, they dress up, they admire their heroes and their fans and the pieces of their lives that they celebrate.
Yeah.
And they celebrate that in groups. And it is a very social experience. And again, the internet was supposedly tolling the death toll for all things physical.
Right.
People just thought, we can just do this online. Why would we ever go to a convention to meet up? But not the case.
Well, it's eventually we'll talk about kind of the merging of those two mentalities, which it seems to be where we're at now. Continuously, yes, there was this move to digital media. I was very much on board with that because I was lazy. I didn't ever want to have to get off my couch to change a movie or something like that. But now I find myself wanting to play those things, and they go by the wayside. A service shuts down. You can no longer access it. Having those physical media, pieces of physical media help. And I think that in sports, maybe you see it this way, maybe you don't. But the idea of collecting a piece of memorabilia is almost like making physical a memory of an event that you have, right? I mean, what else would it be? You're commemorating it and you can touch it and feel it. Daryl Sittler's 10-point night, here's the frame. You can't recapture it apart from maybe watching a clip of it if you can find it. But you do have this physical piece of memorabilia. Has that sense of sentimentality and ownership over the things that you love, has that grown on you at all? Or have you maintained kind of a bit of distance from it?
No, it definitely has. I can appreciate it more in others, and I see it, and I've seen it grow for myself as well. I mean, this year is the big 50th anniversary of the summits here. So again, that brings me back. I mean, walking here into your showroom, I mean, seeing the the goal pieces and everything else is just it's phenomenal. And some of the experiences that I've had, even though I don't consider myself a fan or collector, you guys were great enough to bring Bobby Orr to the event a few years back.
Right.
And Bobby Orr was my idol growing up. I had a pair of Bobby Orr skates when I played. And,
amazing.
Oh yeah.
So sports, you were kind of maybe not fanatical in the extreme sense, but
collecting though.
Yeah,
versus.
You were a fan of sports. You could apply that
Yeah.
logic. Whereas Fan Expo, the comics and stuff like that, you weren't as aware of that culture. But
I didn't get it. I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I started to enjoy it more. But everyone has a connection to it at some level.
Right.
And again, when your earlier question of how do they connect or do they connect, there are a number of points where they do, and it's that everyone has sport or athletic connections, whether that's them directly or through their parents or whatever. Similar they do on the entertainment side, again, be it comics, movies, etc. So that's common. The financial side of things, where dealers, whether you're bricks and mortar or online, it's no different than if you're a sports shop, you sell bikes in the summer and skis in the winter.
Right. Right.
If you're a hobby shop, you've got all the elements of selling sports cards and selling comics and or entertainment cards, non-sports as the category is called. So,
do you ever find any reluctant crossover? The sports fan in the jersey that's kind of like ambling around the booths with the comic book stuff, and that's me. I'm always like, I'm here for business. I'm here to sell sports memorabilia and provide this, and then I always end up going down those paths. Is that something that people
all the time? And it was there's a lot of anecdotal, fun stories about that. I mean, I remember back to the 2013 Fan Expo where we had probably one of the best sport guest lists that have ever been assembled.
Do you remember who would have been there?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
One of the coolest groups of experiences. So on the sports side, we had Joe Montana, Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, Joe Sakic, a young Connor McDavid, a 16-year-old Connor McDavid was there, and he actually did a Q&A at one of the sessions. Willie Schumacher was there. Was that Hulk here? I don't know. And one of the greatest, two stories I'll get to real quick.
No, yeah.
One was Montana wanted to walk around. He'd never been to a Comic-Con, and he said, "Okay, can you get me a couple of security guys?" And said, "Joe, no offense, but you're not going to need it." He walked through the entire expo filled with probably 80,000 people, and not one person stopped him to say, "Hey, you're Joe Montana."
Wow.
So I don't know whether he was happy or offended if that were the case. But,
it always seems like the kind of thing that you don't want to have happen. Like you don't want to be recognized, and then you're not recognized. And you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You don't know who I am. What's going on here? You just
you can't play
in line.
the celebrity card when you want it.
Yes,
Right.
Exactly. So how long have you been involved in expos? You mentioned the sale, which I'll talk about in a little bit of Sport Card Expo. That's when you kind of took over. But how long have you been doing trade shows for?
Well, I've been in the event business since the late 90s.
Yeah.
I was running, and these were events that I was put on, and in the category that I'm more interested in, more athletic events, outdoor, adventure-based, that kind of thing. A whole other story. But through that, I did a race that Mark Burnett produced.
Oh, really?
Called the Eco Challenge. Yeah, Eco Challenge was Mark Burnett's first foray.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I did the first ever Eco Challenge. It was back in '95.
Was that televised?
It was televised, on USA Network.
Oh, wow.
Back at the time,
Like reality TV before.
it was pre-reality.
Wow.
So I did that, and then I started working. I did a race series based on that, and then I started doing work for Mark Burnett in the States. Ended up doing more and more events around that, and in fact, going off topic a little bit, I was trying to create a model for Eco Challenge. I wanted to license the brand from him, essentially.
Right.
Much like, if you're familiar with it, much like the Ironman triathlon.
Sure.
Where they have a whole series of qualifying events around the world.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to create for Eco Challenge. And I just couldn't get his attention. I wasn't asking for any money. I was offering him money.
Yeah.
And so I met with him and his lawyer in LA, and that's when he told me about Survivor. He was working on this show.
He had something else up his
that's when
sleeve,
Survivor broke. And of course, his life and then the whole world of television changed because that was the dawn of the birth, rather, of reality
Just
television.
finished 42, series 42 Survivor last night.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Let me use that as a jumping off point for this next question. Survivor season 1 was wildly different from Survivor season 42. You have people who just know the formula inside and out. They're students of Survivor.
Yes.
It is no longer... I remember, Dad, so specifically, Richard Hatch in the first season of Survivor made an alliance with someone. You were at work, pre-TiVo, we couldn't record it, and you said, what happened in Survivor? And I said, well, Richard formed an alliance with someone, and you said, is that even legal? Like, it was so things have changed and come so far from there. How have trade shows, what is the thing you can point to say, it'll never be like that again, it was wildly different? Is there anything, or is it largely remained unchanged?
Good question. And a lot of it is the same. I mean, the first time I ever went to look at the Sport Card Expo, I got to be honest, I said, wow, is this all there is? There's nothing to do here. And again, I'm not a collector, so I didn't understand that the content is the product, is the experience. But with that said, and where I've put much of my focus since having taken over, is I would like to see my show, the Sport Card Expo, and others like it, take a lesson from Comic-Con.
Sure.
That's a far greater experiential event than are any of the shows. Even the National, which is still the Super Bowl of our hobby, doesn't hold a candle to Comic-Con.
And what is the main difference? It's interactivity.
It's just the depth of interactivity, the level of engagement. I mean, I understand that some of it is economics based.
Sure.
But the biggest thing that I always point to is the model for the celebrity guests.
Yes.
At a Comic-Con, every celebrity guest that comes to appear at a Comic-Con does a Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
They do photo ops. It's just understood.
Right.
It's part of their contracts, but it's also part of what everyone loves. And they want to hear those stories that Will Shatner wants to tell that have never been told before. They want to feel that and see that. And then, frankly, it works in everybody's best interest, because after you sit and listen to him talk for 45 minutes, you want to go and buy a photo op, or you
100%.
want to get an autograph. So that piece, and there's just more that isn't just transactional. There's more experiences that are true experiences, as opposed to, hey, how much for that?
Well, it seems like you've made good progress in bringing some of that to it. It was 2016, I think, that you took over Sport Card Expo. From then, I mean, we know that we got involved. Frameworth did in the initial goings with like the autograph pavilion, for example. You know, bringing in athletes with the express purpose of set times during the day. Here are signings that you go to. I know you've added some Q&As. There was a main stage and all that. Is it possible that Comic-Con and Fan Expo have just existed so much longer in their forms that it took people time to realize that's what was necessary? Or do you think it's just that the people who are going to things like Comic-Con are often actors and writers, and that by nature is more performative? Is that more of what it is?
That is a great point, and you're absolutely right that they feel more comfortable. I mean, I often say you take the helmet off a hockey player, and it's a different person. You know, it's more, they can't just speak in cliches and, you know, we're going to do our best, we're going to give it our all. You know,
exactly.
So, but that's a very critical point. That combined with the financial structure of how deals are typically done, where it's signing per piece, et cetera, versus building it in. But again, I'd like to see that move more in that direction.
Well, Steve was always instrumental. I remember when we did the first autograph pavilion, and your first question to me, can we get some of these guys on stage? I'd like to get them up there doing Q&As.
Right.
And my response at the time, knowing the players that I'm dealing with, was, geez, I don't know if they're going to do that.
Sure.
Certain guys, like an Eddie Shack or some of the alumni guys, they're happy to get up there. The wrestlers, they like to perform, and that ties in with your actor thing. And Eddie was the entertainer.
Your actor thing. That was the most like dad thing to say. Like, how's your actor thing going out in LA, Mike? You're like, I got a bit. It was a commercial for baby formula. I don't know.
But Steve was instrumental in trying to. He put up a stage, and then you hosted a Q&A a few times, and so. And I think the people didn't even know to go sit down and be ready for it at the time, right? They do a Q&A, and I'd be looking around, where are the people? And as time went on, they understood that at 1 o'clock, so-and-so is going to be up there on stage, and then eBay and auctioning things, and became more interactive. That stage took a much bigger role.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a commitment that I've made. And it's not inexpensive, but it's also one that I think is better for everybody that experiences it. And I remember the first Q&A that we did, it was similar to that. It was with Bobby Hull. And the room was quite big. I was probably a bit aggressive in terms of how many seats that I thought would, because to your point, it was a bit removed physically, but then people weren't accustomed to it. So I was saying to my staff, get people up here so they can sit and listen to it and enjoy it. But Bobby was so spectacular, and you guys know Bobby very well. Yeah. He's one of the best storytellers. I always say that Bobby gives probably the best fan experience of anybody that's out there. And the stories he told were just outstanding. And Bobby was my dad's favorite player, so that was a real. And saying that here with you guys is gives me a little goosebumps, because my dad would never have been able to meet him. But so it was phenomenal. So that from that point on, I was kind of committed to this, and I think it's been a great addition.
Bobby Hull, one, there's so many great experiences and stories. Some are a lot better to hear when you're in private than in public.
No doubt.
But I remember, I mean, he causes all sorts of problems too, because if he's one of the last signings of the day,
you're not going home.
They're not closing the building until he's signed every autograph, and he's not rushing anything. No. I remember sitting there going, Bobby, you got to get going. I mean, it's 5 o'clock or whatever the time we're closing, and he's still got a line up in front of him, and there's no way he's rushing anybody through there. And so they literally have to keep the building open till he finishes signing, and he's not doing it because he's given an experience.
Well, if you haven't been to an expo, which by the way, absolutely go check out the website, and if you're in Toronto, you should check it out as well. There will be some signings as well if you're out there listening. Sometimes you'll have an athlete who's there, and they everyone is a good sport. They'll do this, they'll shake your hand, they'll say hi, they'll sign the thing, this and that, move on. Every so often you do get a Bobby Hull type that goes above and beyond, that takes not just the 30 seconds, that takes 2 minutes with everyone. Yeah. And at that point, it's almost to the chagrin of the people organizing. When we were doing the autograph pavilion, and you need to move certain people through, we have a schedule. Someone else needs to be sitting in that seat in half an hour, and no one's moved through the line. And now all of a sudden you have people in the lineup, understandably frustrated because they haven't gotten to see Bobby or whomever, getting mad at me as the organizer because they're not getting there. We may have to cut the line off. And yet when it comes their turn to go say hi to Bobby, they want to take as much time as they can get. It's human nature, right? You want to get up there, but not realizing that there are these logistical, I hesitate to call them nightmares, but I'll call them nightmares that you have to deal with. And I'm sure you have your fair share of those.
Absolutely. And Bobby is kind of the reference point that will say, well, we need a fourth signing station in case we get a Bobby.
Exactly.
We'll often say it in that context. So.
Do you have any other, it doesn't have to be bad situations or anything, but anything that stands out? You mentioned Bobby Hull and the reverence that you have towards him and that your father had towards him. Are there any other signings or people that you've had that really stood out for good or bad? If it's bad, you don't have to name them.
No, listen, absolutely. I mean, the best one was, again, it was in this building. It was with Guy Lafleur. I grew up a Canadiens fan, and so I got to stand back here with Guy for 10 or 15 minutes. He told me the most incredible stories, that you've both heard. But the time that they stole the cup out of Blake's trunk of the car, and he woke up from a neighbor's phone call on a Sunday morning with it in his pool, and so that was outstanding for me. And of course, we lost Guy just recently, and so again, very, very poignant and timely. But yeah, that was a great experience.
Another guy we lost not too long ago, Mike Bossie. I remember that as one of the strangest moments at an expo I've had, because we had a signing with him planned, and the weather in Toronto, out of nowhere, got so bad that the ceiling of the expo, of the International Center, the hall that we were in, peeled off.
Yeah.
There was rain coming in, there was water, it was dark, it was windy. In spite of that, Mike Bossie is sitting on the tarmac waiting for the flight from Montreal to take off so that he could make the signing. I think it was supposed to be in an hour. We told everyone. I was literally standing there to the lineup of people, pointing up to a hole in the roof saying, guys, I don't know that this is going to happen. We're going to delay it an hour, but he's on the tarmac. I can't imagine it's going to take off. And 99% of the people in the line totally understood. They were totally fine. But there was the odd person who thought that maybe I could change the weather and fly him to Toronto myself. That was
some people are just, I mean, 90% of 95% of the people are just amazing, because we've had other situations at the show. I remember Norm Ullman, a senior citizen, came to the show, contracted him for an hour and a half, I think. He gets to 45 minutes and he hit a wall. Can't do this anymore. Yeah. Like he wasn't used to it.
Right.
And at his age, it was really tough on him.
Yeah.
And he just, I said, no problem, Norm. I'm not taking any chances on the players. You look after the players. We'll get you out of here. Can I get you a drink of water? We'll take you aside. And there's 50 people still in line that have paid for their tickets. Now you got to go to everybody and say, look, guys, got to refund your money. I'll try and make it up to you in other ways. We can get them to sign something at a later date and give it to you, whatever you want to do. And most of the people, I said, what do you want me to do? The guy's in his 80s or whatever it was at the time. And some people are great. And they go, no problem. We totally understand. We're fans of his. We want him to be looked after. Yeah. And then you're going to get the odd person that said, I'm going to sue you.
Yeah.
And you go, really?
And I like to summarize it. I just say, look, passion is great, but it does cut both ways.
It does. Absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And so that's tough. But yeah, that expo was an interesting one. We literally blew the roof off.
Blew the roof off of the place.
And it was interesting because I remember now, as you tell that story, there was a point where the sun was coming out and there was a piece of insulation, like pinkish insulation, that had fallen, not fallen, it was hanging. And the way the sun hit it, somebody looked up and yelled, fire.
Fire!
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes.
I do remember that.
You know, think about it. I mean, there were so many things that could have gone wrong with that. Thankfully, if I can be thankful, it was at the back of the hall where the autograph pavilion is. But could you imagine if that had been over the millions of dollars worth of card inventory and so on, the irreplaceable card inventory? But it all worked out, and it was.
They had it fixed by the next morning.
Yeah, it was very impressive.
I was up that whole night ensuring that they had people on the roof, and it was.
Now I've got to, let's talk kind of strictly the way in which you've been working with the Expo over the years. The sponsors that we mentioned, Frameworth had been working with the Spark Art Expo for a long time, running the Autograph Pavilion. We do have booths there as well, but you've been working with companies like Upper Deck lately, especially it seems this time around. You've got new companies like Drip, sponsor of the VIP night, Whatnot, Mint Ink for the trade night. And it seems that there's a much heavier focus on these companies coming in, Upper Deck being more of a traditional memorabilia company, trading card company. These other companies are coming in with much more of a web platform. Drip being a company that focuses on, as the kids call it, ripping packs, right? Like opening up packs with cameras and all that. Has that influenced or changed your business model at ever? Are you seeking new companies like this out, or is it just that the industry and the landscape is changing such that those are the companies who are now looking to sponsor the program?
It's a bit of a combination of both, and I'll back up a little bit on answering that. So my background is on sponsorship and sports marketing, so that was something I naturally gravitate towards. I've good fortune and good experience with that, so I really want to have more of the endemic hobby companies there.
Right.
And so Upper Deck, given their involvement for obviously in hockey, is always been a no-brainer for them to be engaged. I'm trying to get more of the more traditional companies, but through the pandemic, obviously the hobby exploded.
Yeah.
And not only just the size of it, but the way the hobby is transaction. And it has been for the last 10 years with eBay. eBay has really kind of revolutionized the hobby, and they've become a great and lead partner for me in the show, and have helped revolutionize how people buy and sell, but also reinforce the way in which the show gets structured, as well as the transactions.
Sure.
More and more people buy and sell that way. But it's been a great addition to the platform. This year, to your point, we have a lot more, and it's endemic companies and companies that are also new to the hobby.
Right.
So part of that growth has been fueled by a lot of new investors. When I say investors, it could be collectors buy for passion as well as investors that buy for returns. So you're seeing companies like Liquid Marketplace. It's a Canadian-based fractional ownership company along the lines of Collectable, Rally Road, and so on that have existed in the U.S. So a really neat trend in the hobby. So they're engaged. The alternative selling platforms, the specialized platforms are coming in. Whatnot and Drip, the ones you mentioned, for example. The grading companies are all coming up in a big way because of the growth, in which ties in, frankly, to e-commerce, because as people are transacting online more, there's a much bigger emphasis and requirement for authentication and grading, so that you know what you're buying, you get what you think you're buying, et cetera. We have 6 grading companies that will be at the Expo this weekend. 6.
Wow.
Yeah. PSA, Beckett, CSG, SGC, Mint, and KSA.
Wow.
Will all be there. And JSA doing authentication, Beckett Authentication Services doing authentication. So all this is indicative of the way in which the hobby has grown.
Right.
And then many of the dealers are really upping their game. You've got a lot of new dealers like Mint Inc. that are just blowing it up. They have platforms on all, they have a presence rather on all those platforms.
Right.
And they're just doing a much better job of online and in-person retailing. So many and traditional dealers are making a much bigger investment in their on-the-floor presence.
Right.
They're making their booth look better. They're engaging more.
It's
live stream breaks.
It's fascinating to me that companies that have such an online presence still know that at the core of this passion is physical collections, right? Like obviously they're, you're grading physical items and it's physical products being sold, but you got to be there. You got to boots on the ground. You have to make your presence known. It isn't just a matter of search engine optimization for these people. And I know that will have a lot to do with it, but at a certain point you need to be seen next to the big players in the industry, and all the big players still know you got to go to the Sport Card Expo.
You have to do that, and collectors want that experience. It is a very immersive, tactile experience where they still want to look at and see and even smell the the environment.
Yeah. And that environment can smell sometimes.
Especially by that place that sells those hot sausages.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's the hell.
Every year I grab some of those. I don't know if it's sports related, but I make a purchase every year.
There are some famous foodstuffs that you got to stop by when you're at the Expo all the time as well. By the way, the Frameworth booth, if you're making your way down there, is right by the cafeteria there, the permanent food structure.
It is.
I'm not going to say I was the one who chose where our booths were going to go, but I do get hungry pretty easily, and I don't like to walk very far. So, you mentioned the way that the industry is kind of changing, about how the industry changed, especially over COVID. Now, who would have guessed that COVID shuts us all in, and we assume that there's going to be an economic breakdown, and yet we all decide to invest in physical, invest in collecting. The collectibles world changed potentially, definitely for the better, but grew exponentially over that time. Your business model and your life similarly had to change over that time as well. How far along were you in the planning of the next physical in-person expo when COVID shut things down, and what did you do to pivot? Yeah,
everything was in place. I was a late believer in
Sure.
COVID, or I was a denier.
Yeah.
Like, this is a bad cold. We'll be over by May.
Exactly.
And I was late to the party in that sense. My magazines are printed. I probably still have 50,000 of the show magazines that I do. In fact, Jagger was supposed to be the headline guest at that one.
Oh.
So with him on the cover, so I might just get him to sign a few of those for posterity. So those were all printed. We were ready to go. And then this is not happening. And I was reluctant to accept that. All right, it'll be over by November for sure. We can start working on that. And so there were a lot of things that happened. But it was a dead stop for me.
Yeah.
Most of my dealers were great. Just roll my deposit forward into next year. Some didn't want that, but so that was an eye opener for me, to be sure. But very quickly, and one of the great guys that I work with, just started to think he's a lot more tech savvy, and just had been working in the rest of the events he does with a virtual platform. And I thought, virtual, how can we have an event like this online?
Right.
But we did it. We created an event online. And again, I always look to my dealers as my first customer, if you will. They're my primary customer. They are the indication of the hobby. They are the representation of the hobby. And
sorry, just to clarify, dealer, if you're out there listening, would be the people who are actually buying booths to set up shops at the expos. Yeah.
So they're my primary customer in that if I do something that's good for them, they'll, that typically bodes well for the collectors and the attendees. So my primary focus for the virtual show was it has to work for dealers. It has to give the dealers what they're lacking now, and that's the opportunity to buy and sell. I didn't want to just do, a nice webcast or something that was, content, just through content based and like watching an online event.
Right.
So that required that we pick a certain platform that would allow that. And that's what made it successful, frankly. It was unique. There were some other great shows that I couldn't compete with. I'm not a content guy. I don't like being on air. I don't consider myself could
have mentioned that before we booked this interview. Oh man.
Self-serving.
You're doing great. Yeah.
So it was that was my primary focus, and it really allowed me to create a unique property.
Right.
So dealers were able to have a virtual booth where they could sit, as we're doing now, and showcase, whether it be in their living room, their store, or whatever. They could showcase the product they were selling, and literally have live video conversations with, hey, how much for the Topps rookie Gretzky or what have you, or this set, and they could showcase things. Again, Frameworth did an exceptional job of creating really engaging content. I mean, you guys set records for the number of people in your booth and the amount of engagements and so on. You were doing online auctions or live auctions and so on with really engaging staff. So sort of fast forwarding, I ended up doing 3 of those. In total, we had just over 10,000 people attend the 3 virtual shows, 50% of which had never been to one of my in-person shows. So it was great from that perspective. In that it allowed me to grow my database, grow the awareness of the Sport Card Expo brand.
Right.
It really cemented and solidified my relationship with eBay, because obviously that was that's where they live.
Yes.
And so the commerce wasn't necessarily always done on eBay. You could transact through your own website, et cetera. And we've been tremendous partners since that. So it wasn't a money-making proposition for me, but it was absolutely a great brand build. It forced me to do a deeper dive into all aspects of the hobby that I probably wouldn't have done otherwise. So I worked on the business as opposed to in the business, and you guys would absolutely understand that. And I started to do more analysis of collector behavior, so I could understand how can I better serve, where there are opportunities for me. So some interesting things that I did in that sense.
It's fascinating that you say that it wasn't as much done for a moneymaker, but also just relationship maintenance. You can't say no. You need to give people something. That's got it. That they're expecting 2 things a year, and you're giving them something. It was fascinating to take part of. We had a limited operation running during the pandemic, especially early going. We set up the booth here at the Frameworth showroom and had people sitting in front of the camera, spinning wheels, doing auctions, and it was great. And again, I think one of the most important things coming out of that experience, and I'm sure you'll agree, was recognizing that just because you have to do things online doesn't mean it's necessarily worse. There are elements to that you can bring to business moving forward. And that probably has a lot to do with some of the sponsors who are coming on board, recognizing that people are now getting more comfortable and familiar with an e-commerce platform in all of its various forms, because probably, I'll look to you, Dad, for example, someone who definitely had a little bit of a fear, I would say, of doing those sorts of online interactions and shopping. And then look, the pandemic happens, you got to do it. There's no other way around it. We forced everyone to get a level of comfort with working online and living in that space.
Yeah, especially for dinosaurs like me that like getting online and buying stuff. Now I'm on Amazon. It's a piece of cake, but first getting there, the fear of doing all that. I still think though that I get bored one day and I'll get in the car and I'll go to a Home Depot and just walk the aisles and I'll find something that I want to buy just because I want to physically be there. And I think you extrapolate that into the card show, you got to be at the card show. It's just so interesting. I'm there 4 days and I don't need to be there. I got staff to do that, but I'll walk the aisles, and the next day I'll walk the aisles the same way again, because you see one thing one day and you miss it the next day, and so it's worth definitely going to the show. There's just so much to see and be physically there. You can get a lot of that stuff online, but this is a great experience.
You can, but there are things that you don't expect to see that are new.
Sure,
That is,
right.
and scarcity is a big deal. But you'll need more than a single day this year as well, because you mentioned it in your introduction. But so this is the biggest expo that I've ever done.
Right.
In November we were forced because of COVID to be in a different hall.
Sure.
Than the show had been in that hall since its inception. So in a way, I was looking forward to that because it allowed me to shake up the floor plan, do things a little differently. There's some pros and cons to it. For this show, we weren't able to be in the hall that we're generally in, so we're in a new hall number 2. It's the single biggest hall that the venue has, so it's an extra 25% bigger.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's we're sold out. So
I was going to say the website indicates booths are all sold out.
Yeah.
So you had that much demand still.
Well, again, I was sold out in November, but I was really reluctant to just add more booths and dealers unless I knew there was going to be more of course attendees.
Well, we were really pleasantly surprised after the last show because we were hesitant because coming out of COVID, would there be nobody there?
Right.
Plus, because there was still the COVID scare.
Yeah.
And so are people going to come? Are they coming with masks? Are they going to, how is all that going to work? And so we downsized a little because we've been a supporter of this show and for many, many years. And we were disappointed that we did because it was hugely successful, jam-packed with people. And so now we're back to 4 booths now. So,
and also I'm excited for this year because I was still definitely a little bit nervous about the idea of COVID back, not that it's completely off our radar, but that was the first big crowd that I was in last November. That was by far the most number of people that were around, had your masks on and this and that. But things have changed quite a bit in terms of our perspective and some of the requirements around COVID. I'm assuming that's made your life probably a lot easier in terms of the organization of this.
November was a lot of work to have vaccination checking and then enforcing all of that and so on. But again, Brian, your experience with Frameworth was the same that I had from everybody. It's the first show that I've done where a dealer didn't complain. Right. Every single dealer said it was a great show. Many of them said it was their best show ever.
Yeah, we had low expectations, and it far exceeded some of our best expectations. The good news for me was everybody was wearing masks, so when I forgot somebody's name, I had an excuse. I didn't recognize you with the mask on. No, it's me.
I just didn't have to trim my mustache, which is great. I just got it rolled out, and it was nothing, like nothing. How many are you finding that, because you talk about how there's, it was some people's best Expo, which you would think maybe it takes some time to ramp up. But part of me is considering the fact that there is a finite amount of memorabilia out there, cards, frames, game used equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Clearly, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, the industry has grown. The number of collectors have grown. You've said the number of dealers seems to have grown as well. Do you think it's just kind of the fact that, of course you're going to sell more and sell for more because there are more people out there and the same amount of product? Is that kind of what's driving the prices up, or is it just an increased interest?
It's a combination of both. There are definitely a lot more what I'll call institutional investors. And again, the more people with money are being drawn to the sport to the hobby, as more and more awareness, as you get, the $2 and $3 million mantles, as you get the $4 million Gretzky rookie, that reverberates into the mainstream culture that, wow, something's going on here. How do we become part of that? Athletes are wanting a bigger part of their own experience, whether that's controlling their own collectibles or just being, again, the Fanatics announcement where they've taken over the licenses of the 3 other sports with football, baseball, and basketball is changing the landscape dramatically. So there are a lot of big seismic shifts in the space that are happening.
People are attracted to money, it turns out.
So at the core of it is still the collector, and any true collector will say, what drives them first is, do I want to have this in my possession if it hits the fan and the values drop? So that's kind of the yardstick that many people will use to decide, do I buy this or not? But those values have only increased.
They seem to be going up, and that kind of brings me to a question. We do have to sort of wrap up because the listener may not realize this, but Steve, you are on your way back to the venue. We're recording this a day prior to the VIP night opening up on the Thursday, or 2 days prior. So quick turnaround, but The last question I kind of want to get into is this idea, like everything is changing. It's always been changing. And you seem to be on the forefront of that change and embracing it, whereas a lot of people kind of shy away from it. You went to the virtual expo where I think a lot of people would have just raised their hands up and said, we're going to take a break for a little while. Where do you see and how are you prepared to adapt to the changing landscape of NFTs, kind of the antithesis to the physical medium in some ways? Are you planning on incorporating some of that to the expo, allowing for it, advertising it, asking for sponsors who are involved in that space? What is your thinking there?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I kind of use as my gauge on how to approach things. So as I developed this sort of personal slogan at Fan Expo, and initially I used to say, all right, I don't get it, but I'll take it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? It was, I don't understand it, but okay, I can accept it.
Yes.
And all right, how do I support and embrace that? NFTs are very similar for me. I don't get it. I mean, I understand it,
sure,
but I don't get it. It doesn't appeal to me. But one of the things that I saw with the virtual show is that a lot of the guys who are, we all know, I mean, the typical dealer is an older white guy. And I expected a lot of resistance to virtual. And there were some that just said, yeah, this isn't me. I can't do it. But there were many, and some that surprised me, said, yeah, I embrace it. I'm going to fish where the fish are.
Right.
You know, I'll do what I need to do. And the experience that they have, the knowledge they have, the collections they have, people will find them.
Sure.
And it's just more about adapting. It's no different than a website used to be. We used to have brochures and so on, but a website is just a different embodiment of the same. Same
as long
thing.
as the collectors are willing to click a link as opposed to open a pamphlet.
Yeah.
So you're ready and waiting and willing to accept it if it comes your way. Yeah.
You got to play where you're comfortable. And similarly. So I could write a book about what I don't know about the hobby.
Sure.
But what I rely about, I just don't know where to start. What I rely on is people on my team or that I listen to. So I try to be really good at listening. I know what I don't know now, and I'll ask dealers all the time, hey, what do you think about this? I've got kind of a core of people that I'll reach out to.
Good time to shout out Mikey. Mikey, one of my good friends who works with you as well. A lot of experience as well in the convention space, and nerd just like myself. So
he is, and it's been really great. And to that point, there's a story I didn't get to tell. My second greatest experience with the Fan Expo show that had the sports element. We were sitting in the green room, and I was sitting having a break, and Gordie Howe came in with, I can't remember if it was Mark or Marty, but they sat him down. I got to meet him, shake his hand, and everything else. We were sitting here for a few minutes, and then Bobby Orr comes in, which was pretty incredible. So Bobby is talking to Gordie, and then Alice Cooper comes in. And of course, Alice is, I'll call him, he's another Detroit native, and he and Gordie go way back, and Alice is a scratch golfer. Golfs,
really?
Golfs every day.
He's big Callaway.
Very.
Didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he's a phenomenal golfer and just a great person. I mean, his rock and roll persona was exactly that for him. Sure. It was a costume he pulled on, but he was telling stories about all of his experience on the rock and roll side. And then who came in? So there were other celebrities milling around in the green room. There were a couple of guys from The Walking Dead that were there, and I recall Marty Brodeur came in. There was another guest I neglected to mention. And he came over, and he was sitting at our table, and his agent came over and said to me, "Hey, can you introduce Marty to?" I can't remember if it was Norman Reedus or one of the guys
or something like that.
And said Marty's a really big fan. So you had this true integration of celebrities and and the entertainers that were connecting, and that was kind of the embodiment of what we were trying to create. But it was just such a cool experience to walk around. And the other piece, my wife actually had come in during all this was going on, and Hulk came in. Hulk Hogan was there as well. He came in, and my wife is a singer and acted for a while. Sure. And while she was living in LA, she had actually gone out for a tryout for a women's wrestling league.
Oh, no way.
She was a huge wrestling fan and Star Trek fan. So she got to meet Hulk. So that was just that whole collage, if you will.
That is the ideal petri dish of an experiment you want to run at the Sport Card Expo. Yeah, right. That's fascinating. Love stories like that. And I love, one of my favorite things about working in this industry is when you get to see that sort of cross admiration between genres. An artist who likes a hockey player or vice versa, that sort of thing always goes a long way. Well, look, Steve, I know you got a lot on your plate. I know you got to run out and make sure everything's running smoothly, but anything else you want to send people towards? I know Sport Card CarExpoToronto.com is where you can go to find tickets and find out more information about the event. Anything else you want to say to
it's going to be a great experience, and it's there's something there for everybody. It truly is. Again, part of the focus we've made is and the other companies in the space, eBay, Ultra Pro, Upper Deck, have all really made a concerted effort to be a family kind of a business as well. Upper Deck has a kids free piece that they offer, so kids under 12 are free with an adult.
I thought you meant like a zone where kids aren't allowed. It's kind of the opposite, kids-free zone.
Another good idea, actually. So it's great from that standpoint. There's all kinds of great stage content with guest Q&As, but then also live breaks. There's more prizing and contesting and so on than we've ever had before. So it really is that much more engaging and interactive. So yeah, it's going to be great fun. I won't sleep probably until Monday, but that's okay. That's part of the deal.
Means you're going to have a good time. And I do hope that the next time you're giving an interview, the story you tell is this one afternoon, I got to sit down with Brian and Mikey Aaronworth from the Sign Off podcast and record a whole podcast episode. But Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Very excited for this event, as all of you should be out there if you're listening as well. So for Steve Menzie, Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, and myself, Mikey Aaronworth, host of the Sign Off podcast, this is us signing off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions, executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.